Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the launch of our 2020 Hays Asia Salary Guide. In this webinar, we will share with you the key findings from this year's report, which includes a market overview of recruitment trends in Asia and Japan, industry-specific insights, and our recommendations for both employers and employees in 2020. My name is Michael Craven, Regional Director for the Tokyo office of Hays Japan. I've been with Hays for the past 7 years and have been working in the bilingual recruitment market in Japan for the last 20 years. At the end of this webinar, please feel free to contact me or your contact at Hays Japan for any questions and comments on the content we share today or on anything on the recruitment market in general. Okay, let's move into the presentation. Okay, so before we begin, here's a quick introduction to who we are and what we do. Hays is one of the leading specialist recruitment companies globally and is currently the market leader in both the UK and Asia Pacific. Hays worldwide has employed over 11,500 staff to date and operates from 265 offices in 33 markets across 20 specialist industry sectors. In Asia, we continue to strengthen our position in 5 markets: China, Hong Kong, Japan, Malaysia, and Singapore. In Japan, we have been around for 19 years now and are proud to be the official recruitment partner of Manchester City and our very own Yokohama Marinos. We also remain the most followed recruiting and staffing agency on LinkedIn with over 3 million followers and still counting. And if you aren't already, I strongly recommend you follow us for the industry news, CV tips, interview advice, and much more. Okay, so just now's an introduction to the report. This is the 30th edition and the survey period was from September 2019 to October 2019. And we've gone to 5,000 plus working professionals across all of the Asia region. Okay, now on to our key findings for Asia and Japan. Okay, just 1 second. Which slide? This is it. This is that. Okay, sorry about that. We just had a bit of a technical issue then, something dropped out. First, to provide some context and backdrop, I would like to reference findings from the latest edition of our Global Skills Index. Developed in partnership with Oxford Economics, the Hays Global Skills Index examines professional employment markets across the world and measures the ability of companies to assess skilled workers. In Japan, the overall index score increased from 5.9 in 2019 to 6.1 in 2019. The increase suggesting that the labour market has become even more pressured than last year and when compared to historical data. The overall index score is an aggregate of 7 key indicators which were chosen to highlight supply side issues, demand side issues, or both supply and demand side issues related to the hiring of skilled workers. Out of these, the top 3 drivers for Japan's increased score were wage pressure in high skilled industries. The score of 1.1 is a rise from 0.2 last year and means that the wage gap between high skill industries and their low skill counterparts is much higher than it has been for several years. Education flexibility. The number of graduates as a share of the population in Japan has declined, reducing the proportion of skilled workers that firms can choose from. Talent mismatch. The long-term unemployment rate has fallen in Japan, although it remains above the historical average. This may reflect a reduction in the mismatch between job seekers' skills and the skills potential employers demand. And on a broader scale, Asia Pacific's overall index score rose to 5 in 2019 from 4.9 last year, suggesting skilled labour market conditions have tightened and that employers will find it more difficult to attract and retain talent in the region. The main driver for this was the increased wage gap between high and low skilled industries and a growing talent mismatch, which is very similar to Japan's results. Okay, moving on to the next slide, which is all about how Japan is grappling with acute labor shortages compared to the rest of Asia. So the impact of the ongoing talent shortage in Japan is showed in our survey results. According to the survey, employers in Japan have expressed concern over current and impending skill shortages that are higher than average across Asia. Some major areas for concern include 54% of employers in Japan think that their organization does not have the talent needed to achieve current business objectives, compared to 31% average who said the same across Asia. 95% of employers in Japan are sure that skill shortages will hamper the effective operation of their business or department in 2020, similar to the 90% average across Asia. And 58% of employees in Japan are not confident they can recruit candidates with the skills needed to meet their organization needs in the next 12 months, the highest number in Asia to say so. Okay, so the next slide is assessing the impact of skills shortages in Japan and Asia. When it comes to the impact of these skill shortages, the majority of respondents in Japan believe that productivity is the most impacted, followed by growth or expansion, and finally employee morale. These responses were very much in line with the Asia averages for all. The next slide is all about minimizing the threat of skills shortages, and we'll look at Japan and Asia. We asked employers in Japan what actions they have taken to address the immediate skills shortages within their organizations. 58% said they upskill their current workforce by identifying skill gaps and providing training, for example. 43% said they transferred employees between different functions, which was higher than the average of 37%, Asian average of 37%. Internal transfers are definitely a trend we are seeing in Japan for a variety of reasons, including an increasing need for cross-cultural experience. 42% said they had improved their attraction strategy. This could include increasing their recruitment budget, focusing on their employer value proposition, or being open to recruiting from another industry or profession. Moving on to the next slide, which is all around Japan and their optimism for 2020. You know, the general outlook in Asia for the local economy in the next 6 to 12 months is not too optimistic, with only 21% expecting the economy to strengthen. However, Japan seems to be more optimistic, with 31% respondents confident that the economy will strengthen. Similarly, 72% of our respondents in Japan expect their organization's activity to increase in the next 12 months, while 52% expect their organization's permanent staff levels to increase in the next 12 months, as can be expected considering Japan's low unemployment numbers. Both are much higher than the Asia average, which is a sign that Japan will be an active player in the year to come. However, please note, most of this data was collated late 2019, so of course, with the recent global new coronavirus outbreaks, that optimism will have been impacted somewhat. And we just have to hope that in the next couple of months, we will see an overall improvement in the global health and economic situation that we currently find ourselves in. The next slide is all about why are staff looking to leave their role in 2020. This is an interesting slide. So moving to the trends, here's a quick snapshot of what candidates are looking for in the market. As with Asia, Japanese respondents are mostly not actively looking for a job, but are open to new opportunities. Unlike other Asian countries, salary or benefit packages were not the top priority for Japanese employees seeking new employers. For the fourth year in a row, seeking new challenges topped the list instead at 56%, followed by salary, 54%, and a lack of career progression tied with management style and company culture coming in at 36%. While these results are similar to the Asia average responses, it is interesting that Japanese respondents consider seeking new challenges as more important than salary or benefit packages, despite ongoing wage stagnation. This also ties in with the lack of career progression, which is known to be a problem in Japan, where employees, especially senior employees, can hold the same position for years, leaving no room for others to come up. Management style and culture is also increasingly important in Japan, particularly with younger employees who are more particular about how they get along with their bosses and often value a good workplace culture when considering different offers. Right, the next is looking at flexible working options, which are look to be sought after when moving jobs. So work-life balance has been an important topic in Japan in recent years, with many companies incorporating flexible working options to better attract and retain talent. When asked our respondents which flexible working options they would look at when considering a new role, 64% favoured flexi-time options, which means the scope to change their work hours outside of core business hours, which is obviously pertinent in the current situation in Japan in the last couple of weeks. This was also followed by 56% who said home or mobile working and 24% who said compressed hours, which includes 4-day work weeks. Across Asia, remote working or from home was the most preferred option, followed by flexi time and informal flexible working arrangements, which includes an informal understanding between you and your manager when deciding or taking flexible working hours. So next, moving on to salary predictions for 2020, a general overview. So considering the global economic slowdown, employers are expected to be more conservative when it comes to increments in 2020. Most employers in Japan expect salaries to increase by up to 3%, 54% over the next 12 months, but some also expect increases from above 3%, but less or equal to 6%, which ends up at 25%. Only 16% expected no raise at all, which tied with Hong Kong to be among the lowest in Asia to think so. Across Asia, most employees fall within the two brackets as well, making these likely to be an average range of increments expected across the region in 2020. Next, let's look at the results for compensation packages and the sentiment towards those. Results of the guide showed that 58% of employees in Japan were satisfied or very satisfied with their current compensation packages. This is a healthy sentiment overall, and interestingly, Japan shares these numbers with China, who also scored at 58% when asked how satisfied they were with their compensation. Moving on to hard skills and whether they're more in demand than soft skills, it's another interesting slide. We know that Japanese employers are aware of the impact skill shortages could have, but what skills are now most in demand? When it comes to hard skills, foreign language fluency is most in demand in Japan, an expected response considering the demand for bilingual speakers. This is followed by statistical analysis and data mining and project management, both of which are in high demand across Asia. Soft skills are increasingly important in both Japan and Asia. The soft skills employers are looking for the most are problem solving, the ability to work in teams, charisma, and/or verbal communication skills. So looking to the future, what are the future of employees going to look like in Japan, in Asia? So a recent report by Dell Technologies found that 85% of tomorrow's jobs haven't been invented yet, which is an interesting point. It says that according to many, it's time to invest in a different set of skills that will be vital in 2030. Professionals across Asia seem increasingly concerned about how future-proof their skills are. However, Japanese professionals are more confident that their skills will still be in demand in 5 years as compared to the Asia average. But despite this, most Japanese professionals have kept to the Asia average and said they spend at least 1 to 2 hours a week upskilling. 27% spend 3 to 5 hours a week upskilling, while 17% spend 0 hours a week to upskill. Okay, so let's look at the temporary contract market as well. It appears that flexible recruitment solutions Sorry, I pressed a button on my phone and I apologize for that. It appears that flexible recruitment solutions or the hiring of temporary or contract staff in Japan is a phenomenon that is here to stay. 26% of employers in Japan expected their use of temporary or contracting staff to increase in 2020, the highest number to think so in Asia. 2 years ago, only 16% of Japanese employees thought so, and 21% across Asia. The growing numbers are in line with growing awareness of flexible recruitment and its benefits in Asia, and particularly in the tight markets such as Japan. Most employers in Japan would hire temp staff to meet peaks in demand, followed by cost effectiveness, and finally to solve the difficulty of finding permanent staff. Businesses are most likely to hire temp or contracting staff for their communication skills, followed by tech or digital skills, and finally for their data and analytical skills. Okay, let's have a look at work-life balance now. Has it got worse? Has it got better? All right, there's been a slight decrease in work-life balance satisfaction in Japan. Only 49% were satisfied or very satisfied, as compared to 53% last year. This could perhaps be attributed to growing awareness of work-life balance in Japan and its increasing importance to employees. Similarly, respondents across Asia were slightly less satisfied than last year, with only 49% saying they were satisfied or very satisfied, as compared to 50% last year. Okay, so let's now look at a very interesting slide, which is the number of women in management positions. Does it remain the same? I think it remains about the same in Japan. So despite widespread knowledge of Japan's D&I issues, particularly with gender, our stats show no significant progress in Japan's drive to appoint more women to line manager levels. If we look into the results of our diversity and inclusion report released late last year, this comparative paucity of women in leadership has led to the majority of employees in Japan saying their leadership teams were not diverse and they did not think their organizations were working to develop underrepresented groups into leadership roles. In Asia, there has been a minor increase of 1% from last year, which definitely isn't fast enough. It is also common knowledge that Japan has been trying to become more open when it comes to foreign talent. However, there has only been a minor 1% increase in the number of foreign workers in Japan from last year, while there has been a minor drop of 1% across Asia. So let's move on now to some industry-specific insights. These are based on market observations and commentaries by our own managers and recruitment experts. So first, let's look at information technology. So, there's a rising trend in hiring embedded technology skilled candidates, along with skilled bilingual who are bilingual are in very short supply. As manufacturing companies and industrial software firms and the automotive industry continue to enhance their hardware and software capabilities, there is an increasing demand for embedded developers and testers that is expected to continue into 2020. This is especially the case for the automotive industry, as new vehicle models continue to offer more features and connectivity year by year. The space is also seeing a skill shortage in Japan, which is pushing up salaries for suitable technical candidates, even more so if they are bilingual. There's also been an ongoing transformation to new digital technologies and 5G, and we expect to rise in salaries there. Companies across these multiple industries continue to hire IT candidates with newer skills in AI, robotics, machine learning, and automation as they transition to and transform their IT environment to utilize these new technologies, alongside hands-on technical engineers in these areas. Continued hiring is also expected for business analysts, project managers, and team managers who can pull projects together and manage the overall IT environment. Considering the high demand candidates with these skill sets experience, we can expect to see salary increases ahead. Moving further into 2020, the expansion of 5G networks and technology in Japan will create hiring needs and increase in salaries for engineers and managers with the prior 3G and 4G experience, as well as linked technologies like cloud and Internet of Things. Supply chains will also go digital or have gone digital, and e-payments are on the rise. So the systems to support them are highly important now. So e-commerce and mobile technology businesses will also continue to grow their online services by enabling easier payment options and faster manufacturing and delivery through more efficient technology optimized supply chains. Applications like Apple Pay, Alipay, and Line Pay will also become increasingly important alongside ongoing upgrades to typical warehouse management systems, point of sales, and supply chain management systems. Candidates in these areas can expect to have plenty of options in the market and enough leverage to negotiate pay rises. Okay, now moving on to life science. So there's been some changes there and some impacts there. So regulatory changes and an aging society and cost pressures has driven a change in the research and development strategies in a lot of organizations and across the nation. So alongside adapting the nationwide drive to allow more flexibility in the workforce, this year's focus for Japan's life science industry will likely be around R&D in oncology, rare diseases, gene therapy, and RNA-related therapies. This is partly due to the changes in the Japanese regulatory landscape around facilitating approvals for orphan drugs, but also due to the ongoing context of an aging society that has put pressure on companies to perform at lower costs. To justify the cost effectiveness of their treatments, companies will need to continue hiring health technology assessments and pricing specialists, as well as real-world evidence generation specialists to support health outcomes. The regulatory changes have also translated into significant demand for regulatory affairs specialists. Foreign investment also is fueling the growth of the contract research organizations in Japan. So Japan remains an attractive market for foreign startups and small companies, especially in the medical devices and orphan drugs areas. These companies are in turn relying on contract research organizations already present in the country to start their operations. Consequently, there is a growing reliance on CROs or contract sales or CSOs in the sector for both pharmaceutical and medical device companies, as well as new CROs trying to penetrate the market. In the clinical space, this translates into more pharmaceutical companies relying on CROs for their clinical trials, necessitating vendor management roles like clinical trial managers. Conversely, CROs are hiring clinical research associates with monitoring experience. These factors have created a high demand in an area that is already severely short on candidates. Also, early retirement for medical representatives and growth of outsourcing results in fewer in-house sales roles. So MSL, hiring is on the decline. In the commercial area, pharmaceutical companies have been implementing early retirement programs for medical representatives, resulting in an abundance of experienced candidates on the market. Many established companies are replacing their sales teams with medical representatives from CSOs that have been aggressively hiring, a trend which is expected to continue in 2020. In the medical area, while recent years saw a surge in hiring for medical science liaison roles, the trend decelerated in 2019 and will continue to do so in 2020. Instead, more focus will be given to hiring experienced medical advisors. Bilingual PhD holders in specific therapeutic areas and medical doctors will be the most sought after. The medical affairs area is still growing overall with yet again an increase in MSL hiring from CSOs. Okay, so now moving on to the manufacturing operations industry sector. So we're seeing a major technology shift there. The industry is seeing a shift from mechanical technologies to automation. Companies that were originally focused on gasoline-related products, for example, are now making significant investments into AI, robotics, electronics, e-mobility, and connectivity. However, it is worth noting that many companies are still not making profits on these new technologies, and some analysts have forecast negative results in the coming years. This has caused companies to be extra careful when hiring in these areas and conservative with their salary increases. But while salaries this year are certain to remain on a par with those in 2018, they are still significantly higher than that of the average population. The automotive sector has been increasingly facing headcount approval issues as well as hiring freezes since early 2019. This may be partly due to the trade restrictions between the US and China, with some companies adopting a wait-and-see attitude to their recruiting plans. Other industrial sectors have had a steady performance with a high demand for project managers, application engineers, field service engineers, and research and development professionals. Aging population is also pushing employers to hire from overseas and relaxing language requirements. So the shift to newer technologies has led to a significant mismatch and a consequent gap between employer requirements and the current candidate market and the skills available. When hiring for junior roles in new technologies, employers prefer hiring younger candidates, hiring younger junior candidates, but according to the statistics by the Japanese government, about 30% of the country's population is older than 65 years of age. The result is that most of such roles are left unfilled for more than a year on average, which is a long time. To bridge this gap, companies are increasingly hiring qualified engineers from overseas and relaxing their requirements for Japanese language skills. However, candidates will still need conversational or business level fluency in Japanese to be considered. Candidates with degrees in engineering from universities in Japan or with work experience in Japanese companies elsewhere in Asia will also have a strong advantage. We expect this trend to continue in 2020. Okay. Now, banking and financial services. So headcount is being restricted somewhat, and bilingual and process improvement skills are in demand at this current point in time. So while hiring new headcount has been restrained in the investment banking divisions, for example, asset management, risk management, finance, compliance, internal audit, and other middle office functions, replacement hiring continues to offer significantly competitive salary packages. Bilingual talent in particular stand to see increased compensation in these areas. For other functions such as risk, restrictions on new headcount have led to a focus on hiring individuals who can make workloads more manageable for smaller teams by automating and streamlining processes. This trend is expected to continue into 2020 across multiple quantitative functions, eventually leading to a consolidation of functions and teams, as is already planned at most major Japanese banks. There's also been a subdued performance, which has brought about some cost cutting and brought some competitors to the forefront. So lower revenues and subsequent increase in cost cutting initiatives had led to a reduced bonuses when compared to previous years. However, initiatives to improve work-life balance, particularly among Japanese banks, are providing employees with more flexibility than ever before. Candidates also have an increasing number of opportunities outside of the traditional finance industry. This includes fintech, blockchain, distributed ledger companies, or startups that are leveraging the dismal performances of traditional banks as an opportunity to present themselves as an attractive alternative. This is particularly true for finance and risk specialists, who now have ample opportunities for salary increases if they choose to move, considering they are also sought after within traditional banking. And the final point is Japanese banks move away somewhat from the fresh graduate hiring model. So senior management at many Japanese banks have strongly indicated a decrease in reliance on fresh graduate hiring, particularly due to the changing attitude towards employer-employee relationships in Japanese corporate culture. Traditionally, graduates in Japan would take 1 to 3 years to get up to speed, but go on to dedicate a significant portion of their entire careers to their first employer, making the initial downtime a worthwhile investment for employers. But Japanese banks are now losing out to foreign banks who offer higher salaries and more flexible work environments for the same level of candidates. This trend is expected to continue into 2020 and will likely make Japanese banks more competitive in the mid-career candidate market as they move from relying on fresh grads to recruitment agencies. Okay, so now moving on to recommendations for employees. So we've got 4 major points here that we'd like to put across. The first is, we believe organizations who are looking to develop high-skilled top talent need to, if they don't have at this current point in time, develop separate wage systems in order to be able to attract and retain that talent. The second point is we believe that organizations should invest in new skill areas and new technology areas for the long term and then incubate talent in those areas. What that means is if an organization starts a department, let's say a new data science team or an artificial intelligence team, and it lasts 6 months and then they close it down, then the talent will go and there'll be no development of talent within the organization and no foresight for the future of what's to come. So it's about long-term strategic investment into those areas and incubating the associated talent. We need to also continue to develop new graduates' core skill sets. So when organizations hire new graduates, we believe that instead of, let's say they graduate in data science, but then they move into an investment bank or another organization and they're asked to work in non-related departments for various different time periods, then their core skill set that they learned at university and through their educational background is diminished over time, and then they have less value. So we believe that if a person's hired with a very good core skill set, then that should continue to be nurtured and they should be put to work and developed within the correct departments where their skill set aligns, so that they can continue to develop their skill set and leveraging that and impacting the organization's efficiencies. And then the final point for employees is we believe that, you know, a big answer here lies in, you know, we can't magic candidates out of the air. Nobody can magic high-skilled candidates out there. There's a shortage in demand. So we can advise employees to retrain their existing workforce in skill short areas. So if organizations have an area that they want to strategic develop over the next 2 or 3 years, then it's worth looking into your current organization. Which skills aren't going to be needed? Who are the good people in those areas? Identifying them, testing them, and then looking to retrain them over the next 6 to 12 months to 2 years to enable to leverage that skill set in the future. Okay, and then recommendations for employees. So the first recommendation we have is choose an organization that, it kind of ties into what we're talking about with employers, is choose an organization that will invest in the further development of their skill sets or help you to develop a new valuable one. So, you know, employees should be looking to choose organizations that are going to think about their future and going to think about the skill sets that they have now, but also the skill sets that they will need in the coming years in order to be relevant and to add value. And also, you know, we believe that in Japan in particular, organizations need to be, employees need to be flexible to move mid-career if the opportunity is right. Now, that's not traditionally always been the case in Japan or in Asia to a certain extent. And it shouldn't always be the case, and we're not encouraging everybody to move mid-career, but people should, if there's a good opportunity to develop skills and to leverage skill sets and to help another organization to grow, then people should be flexible or have the mindset to be flexible to move mid-career, because it will benefit organizations, individuals, and the economy as a whole, particularly for the future. Also, employees should be open-minded about retraining in entirely new skill sets. We do see sometimes that people, you know, really want to stick to their current skill sets, but some of these current skill sets are getting out of date and will not be relevant in 1 to 2 years, if not relevant now. So we do advise that if there are opportunities, and particularly new skill set areas coming up that are going to be prevalent in the coming years, then employees should be open-minded to retraining those. And the final one is a very simple one, but it's about knowing an employee knowing their rights when resigning a position. You know, there is circumstances that, you know, happen in Japan where employees don't actually know their rights when they're resigning for a position, and they actually feel that they cannot move. And that, you know, in the end will long-term damage the individual, long-term damage their current organization and future organizations who wanted to hire them, and the economy as a whole, and the development of the, you know, whichever industry it is in the future. Okay, that brings us to the end of our key insights from the Asia recruitment trend today. However, I would strongly recommend looking at some of our other thought leadership pieces, such as our Global Skills Index, which recently came out, and also our Diversity and Inclusion Report, Overseas Returnee Report, and more to get the latest data and a full picture of the recruitment landscape in Japan and Asia. And thank you. You know, finally, I'd like to say thank you for your time today. This is the first time we've done a webinar for the salary survey. It was decided at the beginning of the year that we'd try something different this year, and it's actually quite relevant with the current coronavirus outbreak. So I'm glad we actually chose to do this way this year. Again, you know, we don't have time for questions today, and the format's not really right for that. But please feel free to contact either myself. I'm going to share something on LinkedIn with my email address and phone number later if you want to contact me, or your specific Hays contact about any of the content that we shared today, or if you have any general questions about the recruitment market, anything's fine. Finally, I'd like to say please stay safe in the current environment, and we look forward to meeting and speaking to you in the near future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.